Welcome to Ride with Rahul for another review. We have revisited very few bikes that we have previously covered. Old Ride with Rahul subscribers will remember that back in 2015, we had traveled to Pune to test ride this bike in Lavasa and make the review. Yes, we weren't sponsored back then and even now we aren't, just a bunch of enthusiasts bringing out reviews for you guys. So support us by subscribing and let's jump right into the review. Specs wise, not much has changed. It's still a 109.5cc single cylinder SO8C engine with 24.1 horsepower and 18.6 Newton meters of torque. Yes, this engine is a modified version from the Duke 200. The brakes are okay at 300mm disc up front, but they could do with a bit more bite. The rear brakes are decent as well, but they lack ABS as Rs200 only comes with a single channel ABS. To improve mileage, they have downsized the rear tire to a 130mm section, but I'm happy to say that it doesn't affect the bike's top speed stability. The ground clearance, however, is lower at 157mm, and that means high speed breakers scrape the bottom fairing, something that can be fixed by maxing out the preload at the adjustable rear suspension. The front suspension is a standard telescopic fork, a step down from the USD forks found on the KTMs, and they have a softer setup. The frame is also a cost-cutting exercise with a perimeter type frame, giving this bike a hefty 165 kilograms of curb weight fully fueled. Styling wise, the Rs200 has always been slightly controversial. I like the twin projector front headlamps, but the fairing is a bit overdone with too many lines, stickers and grills flowing through the panels. The unusually shaped rear tail lamps are quirky, but I kind of like them. The bike has a traditional front-heavy styling, but the weight distribution is kind of centered. With the raised clip-on handlebars and the normal foot pegs, Bajaj's claim of this being a sport bike doesn't really stand, and the Rs200 is more of a sports tourer. With the 13 liters of fuel tank capacity and a stellar mileage of 35 kilometers per liter, which can even increase on the highway, this bike has a massive 455 kilometers of range, which is great for long highway tours without frequent refuelings. And enough with the specs, it was finally time to put this motorcycle to road and see how it performed. Got to over 143 kilometers per hour. I guess if you can coax it, it will go a bit further. We're riding India's 200cc sport tourer, the Pulsar Rs200. Originally rode the Pulsar Rs200 back in 2015 when it came out. Haven't ridden it after that. The problem with that bike was the mirrors, and they've improved the quality of the mirrors, but the angle looks pretty awkward. I think it can be adjusted. It's got clip-on handlebars, but they use handlebar razors. What that makes it is very comfortable ergonomics. It is slightly leaned forward, but if you have compared it with the KTM RC200 or something like that, the riding posture is way different and a lot more friendly. Front end is around 20-degree lean forward on the upper body, but foot pegs are, believe it or not, it's less rear set than the KTM Duke 200, which is a naked bike. So very much comfortable ergonomics, just the front lean slightly, and a lot of people prefer that because that takes away some of the pressure of your back and puts it, kind of balances it with the wrist. Agility wise, just was riding the Duke 200 a few hours back, maybe 1 hour back, and agility wise not in the same league as that. The engine does feel peppy. The power delivery is, you know, initially when the bike came out, it had a kind of like a throttle lag that I don't feel any longer, which is good. The motorcycle has changed, but it's still an SOHC engine, and you do feel that in the refinement levels the KTMs are doing better now, because there is a slight amount of vibration on the right handlebar, and even foot pegs feel pretty vibey. When you're raising the RPM to above 6,000, the vibrations kind of reduce, but below 4,000 there is a significant amount of vibration. Suspension is absolutely soft, not good for handling, but extremely good for bad roads, or like I went over the speed breakers, didn't even feel it. So this is more like your relaxed ergonomics kind of a thing. I know Bajaj markets it as a sport bike, but it's not really a sport bike, to be very honest. Let's put it through some corners and see what it feels like. You know, opening up the throttle in the higher RPMs, the engine feels better, to be very honest. And the RS has a problem in its launch. When you're launching it, the fueling isn't exact, or maybe there's some problem with the clutch. But when you're launching the bike, initially the power is kind of dipping in and then it's surging back up. But you do have to pin the throttle all the time to enjoy the performance. It's more top-end into a motorcycle. On the Duke you have a very good low and mid-range. With this bike the power starts in at mid-range, the low end's pretty weak, and feels very mediocre. I mean, this is another 200cc, and right off the bat when you get it from the Duke 200, it feels like this is so much less power. But like we said, that the Duke 200 runs out of steam at around 130 kilometers per hour, whereas this one was easily going to 140 and then kind of crawling to 143. That was its top speed. So believe it or not, despite having the front suspension, front fairing I mean, the Duke 200 is still better in the corners, because this one, the front suspension is a standard telescopic fork and not an upside down fork like the Duke 200 or the RC 200, and it is a softer setup that makes it good for bad roads or touring, but in corners it feels pretty spongy. There's not much confidence that I can generate out of this motorcycle. But on the higher revs, whereas the Duke engine feels more stressed, this one does feel better. So on a highway where having a little bit of like wind protection may be important to you, I have a feeling that this bike is gonna do a lot better. Despite everything, I'm not being able to launch this bike properly. So I had a short ride on the Pulsar Rs200. I've ridden this bike back in Lavasa 4 years back when the bike was initially launched. Not much has changed. They've improved the fit and finish, they've improved the mirrors, which was the weakest point on this motorcycle. Everything else is same. I did find that there is a lack of refinement still. There is vibration on the handlebars and there is vibration on the foot pegs as well, especially on the right side of the motorcycle. But that's below 4,000 RPM. When you're moving up to the mid-range over 4000, right up to 7000 RPM, the vibrations kind of reduce. So that's always there, and a better thing, because most of the people who buy this bike want to buy it for highway touring. This is still a good highway tourer, because you can take this bike onto touring, and when you are doing the 120 130 kilometers per hour cruising speed, it can manage. Now its top speed is 140 kilometers per hour. So this bike has been tuned a little differently. The Duke has lower end is stronger, but on this bike the top end has more punch, so it doesn't feel that much stressed while doing 120. Riding the Duke, I could easily compare that the Duke was doing 100 to 110, whereas this one can easily do 120 for cruising speed. The engine does not feel that much stressed. So definitely a better bike for the highway, and the Duke's better bike for the city. And it definitely matters because it doesn't have that much kit. It's about 20,000 cheaper, no upside down forks, and no trellis frame. It's much heavier. So if you're buying a bike for city, I'd probably go with the Duke. And if you're buying a bike just for touring, mostly on the highways, this definitely makes more sense. Overall, I don't mind the Duke. If you're buying something for both, I probably will still go with the Duke, but a lot of people prefer that fared look, and a lot of people prefer that wind protection. Though because of the more upright riding position, I must warn you that the wind protection isn't that much. This fairing is more for aesthetics, and does add a little bit to the front being heavy, a little bit more feedback, but that's about it. I've never been a big fan of the Rs200, to be very honest, so this review might not look super positive, but I like more on the NS200. When I feel that a company makes a sport bike, it should be like a little bit more active, should make me connect to the rider, bike. Should make the rider connect to the bike a little bit more, which is there on the RC200, but I do understand the differentiation here. The seats are very comfortable for both the rider and pillion, so definitely makes good case for a tourer, specifically for two-up touring. So that's the Rs200 for you, 2019. I definitely think it's getting old now. The looks are getting dated. They should do a revamp version 2 of RS. If you want, Bajaj is listening, please make it happen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon. This is Rahul. Goodbye.